Welcome back to another episode of the Deductionist podcast. The podcast from New Zealand today. I don't know where that accent, where that voice came from. It was barely an accent. It was just more of a mistake in my speech, more so than anything. Hello to Alvis, who's in early. Good evening, Mr. Jane. How are we all? Hope you're all keeping well and lovely. Slightly different time to the usual stream today, but I was working, so I know, right? Shock horror. But I had sessions to run, and there we are. So it had to be done. So how are we? I hope you're all keeping well. Um, Let me tell you about my day. Oh, I've never seen you around before. Hello. Hello, Silver O. Hey, welcome, welcome. Um, so just to address something as well, right? There was a comment on one of the shorts on my channel um, that read, "I used to like my videos, but it's kind of gone off the rails a bit." Now, I say that not fishing for compliments or anything like that, just to kind of address where the change has been and where a lot of the material difference that you're seeing is coming from, right? So that if it is that you're not a fan of it, I can warn you ahead of time. And that's totally cool, right? You like what you like at the end of the day. There's a quote that I like to use from the TV show Lucifer, which is opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one, and so rarely do you want to hear from one. I like it, right? I like it, and I say this not to disparage the commenter at all. It's an opinion, right? It's an opinion at the end of the day, but just to kind of let you know where the changes are. Um, I've been very inactive in terms of posting videos on there for quite some time, mostly because of the workings with Omniscient and my real life Sherlock guys and casework and coaching and everything else that's come up in my working life ahead of time. So the posting schedule around that has changed, and because I'm working more in settings with some wonderful ladies and gentlemen, but are very different to the original stuff that I used to post. I'm sharing that with you. Right, I'm sharing that with you. So there's been some shorts posted from a discussion that I had with Bob Pointer and Jim Wenzel, and I ran a productive communications course with them. You should know Jim by now if you've been a fan of the channel for God knows how long. He's my colleague over at Integris. It's a security firm that we founded together. Jim has pretty much held every job in law enforcement that you can possibly hold. And Bob, I met Bob a while back um, after we did some work together, and hang on. It's distracted me. My wife's put Jeremy Brett on the TV. This might be a very short podcast. I know it is. That's why but she put the Adventure of the Spackle Band on. So my attention will be taxed, but I'm here with you. There it is. Anyway, so there was some discussions on productive communications that we spent together, and we've actually got some courses coming out on Omniscient connected to that. We've got an 8 week session starting on this Tuesday that you can get involved in, and you'll get the first round of the visual courses for free as a part of that. But I'm bringing you along on the discussion with that, and then me and Jim sat down with Ken Murray, he's basically. Uh, how can I say something without blowing his ego up? Ken would never accept it anyway. Ken doesn't have an ego. Um, but he's basically the god, the wizard, the grand Mac Daddy, the person behind the curtain of the creation of methods for reality-based training. and created his own line of firearms to bring it into safer training procedures. It's called Simunition. He's got a great book on this topic called Training at the Speed of Life. And he works for literally reality-based training within law enforcement and in the security services at mass. So we're bringing discussions around that. And so if it is that you're seeing the shorts and wondering why it's changed, that is why. Is because I want you guys to be able to hear some of the conversations that I'm having, learn from some of the conversations that I'm learning from, and it's all part of the growth towards the same skill sets. The original videos will be coming back when I have more of a schedule to be able to do it. I've got my first blog coming out, my first vlog coming out on Tuesday, which is going to kind of document my time with the Sense AI unit, which is a neurofeedback brainwave development unit that looks like something from Back to the Future. And I mean, well, we I'll save the video for it on that, but like I had to coat part of the nodes in water before they electronically charged my head. It was like putting my own low-key electric chair hat on, but there we are. So that's kind of the reason for the change, and I bring that up so you can all be aware of it. The old videos are coming back, but I want to share some of the conversations with some of the people I'm having conversations with that you guys can't. So I want to make sure that you guys can learn from it as well in the same way that I am. So that's why they're there. Yes, it's taken from bigger conversations as well, of which you will be able to find the link for the larger conversation so you can get the context to it as well. But that's the reason for the change, right? So just something to be aware of moving forwards. Now, the the concept for the day is Sherlock as a philosopher. Sherlock as a philosopher. And I, for one, I enjoy philosophizing about whatever it is that I say we, it might be us, that we are talking about. We as in me and whomever it is that I'm talking to. Because all philosophy is, in my interpretation of it, which isn't the right or the wrong one, it's just mine, it's just a personal opinion. It's all philosophy is it's just fancy, more descriptive and in-depth metaphors to provide differential understanding. That's all it is, right? I can philosophize about uh, 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 approaches to life through using neuroscience just as easily as I can through using Sherlock Holmes. So it's all about the understanding that one wants to create as part of the process, right? So I thought what we do is I go through a few of the quotes and talk about some of the neuroscientific, the philosophical, the scientific, the psychological underpinnings that could go into this quote. I don't want it to turn into one of those English lessons where your English teacher asks you, "What did the author mean here by describing the curtains as blue?" And then you come back with that they were blue curtains. Well, no, it's actually a symbol of the depression. It's not about that, right? So I'm very much of the understanding that this is my interpretation of what is being spoken about here. You guys might achieve something different from it, but this is just mine. So these are in no particular order as well. So the first one I have for you is education never ends, Watson. It is a series of lessons with the greatest for the last. How beautiful is that, right? Something that should be on a t-shirt, something that we used in the Deductionist series as well, many moons ago. But when you look at what goes into that, you could argue that there is a certain degree of um, neuroplasticity involvement, and that the quote aligns with the kind of scientific understanding of the brain's ability to adapt and change throughout life, right? It's neuroplasticity. suggesting that learning is not confined to childhood or adolescence, but continues throughout our lives. How many people do we know within our particular fields or particular disciplines that are happy with reading a paper or a book or taking a course and determining that they have the the most comprehensive overview of the information that can be found there, right? Even now, with all of the books that I've accumulated, courses that I've taken, people that I've met, yada yada yada, I'm still learning every day. I'm still learning every day. I was speaking to one of the guys from my Sherlock group earlier. Uh, his name's Pascal. He's in Canada, and we were talking about um, medical applications as he works in the medical field. And at the end of the day, I said to him, look, this is going to be uniquely beneficial for me because for whatever experience I have in that area, it's in England. You will go to places in Canada that I can't go to, talk to people that I can't, use these methods in situations that I have yet to experience, so I can learn from that. Now, if it was that I'd kind of sat here thinking, well, nearly 25 years at this, I've got a good wealth of experience and knowledge under my belt. I know all that there is to. I've stopped learning, right? I've stopped learning, which is why I don't really like the terms expert, master, number one in the field, top of the chart. I don't like that. I mean, they're wonderful compliments when people pay them to you, and when people use them, they're wonderful compliments, but they don't really mean anything. It's just indicating that you've stopped learning. I'm an expert now, so I don't need to learn anymore. I'm a master, so I don't need to learn anymore. I'm number one in this, so I don't need to do anything else. And I'm sure people who are number one in their fields don't think that way. That's just my opinion on the terms that are adjacent to that, because it connects to stopping learning. It connects to stopping growing. This lifelong learning element. I mean, the quote emphasizes the importance of continuous learning as a means of personal and intellectual development, right? It aligns with, excuse me, I will cough throughout this as well, as I'm just getting over COVID. Today is the first day in maybe 2 weeks when I've been able to speak for an extended period of time without coughing up, well, without coughing up something multicolored. let's let's say that. Um, but it aligns with the scientific consensus that the brain remains active and capable of acquiring new knowledge and skills well into old age, right? Like if you look at the philosophical side of things, the strictly philosophical, the epistemology stuff, right? The quote itself touches on that area, which is the philosophical study of knowledge. It suggests that knowledge is a dynamic process. It's not this kind of static element. These greatest lessons, they might lie in the future, which implies that our understanding of the world is consistently and constantly evolving. Yay, that's Pascal. Welcome. I was talking about you earlier, good sir, which is obvious because you've commented that same. And then we could connect that to existentialism, right? It's got existential undertones, suggesting that personal growth and meaning are found in the journey of learning rather than the final destination, right? So I am coming to the end of a 12-month cycle of classes that I run. It's a 12-month course. And on the one hand, I could sit there and say, 12 months done, game over, you've finished. But if I've done my job right, then everyone that's on there could see that as a beginning. for all of these topics that you can go and look at, and all of these things that you can get involved in, and all of these disciplines that you can master, and all of these elements that you can learn, right? It aligns with the existentialist belief that life is a constant search for meaning and purpose. My wife is blowing her nose. When I got no, apologize, my love. No one can hear you. I can hear you. It's just that when I got COVID, I took her out as well. So she's dying in the corner because of me. Um, I didn't do it on purpose. But again, look at the psychological motivations. There is a kind of an intrinsic, well, again, motivation. It implies that learning should be driven by a want, by a need, by evolution, not evolution in terms of the monkeys into man, but as evolving, right? Rather than some kind of external reward or a pressure in that if I learn X, I'll get a certificate, right? There's a bunch of, I mean, this is one of the things I was talking to Jim and Ken about, that people seem to believe that my videos have gone off the reservation as a result. You can come across these schools that function as nothing more than certificate machines, right? And there is a difference between knowledge, information, and wisdom that connects to that. I mean, there is a certain degree of psychological research that suggests that individuals are more likely to learn and retain information when they're genuinely interested in the subject matter. So if it is that we find our evolution as the genuine interest and our growth mindset as a genuine evolution in this area, then all topics can connect to that, right? And that's just one quote from Sherlock. That's huge. That's huge, right? So when people say it's just a series of books, and I imagine, I mean, I've read them, but I'm not as much of a fan of them as I am of Sherlock. But people say Lord of the Rings, similar things. People say Harry Potter, similar things. Anything Marvel Comics, anything that you read that you take a good swell or source of inspiration from, you're not looking to find deeper meanings. These deeper meanings are being presented to you, right? And that's the reason Sherlock has endured for over a century, as one of literature's icons that has inspired so much around the world. Much to, I imagine, Conan Doyle's chagrin. um, Sorry, Artie, but it is what it is. Here's another one for you. I am a brain, Watson. The rest of me is mere appendix. I am a brain, Watson. The rest of me is mere appendix. Right, and certainly as a neurospicy individual, the Optimus Prime of autism in my family, certainly feels that way. That I'm just focused on nurturing this. I realize that drinking this during is kind of counterintuitive, but it's the reason I got my tests done on my Sense AI unit earlier. But anyway, let's look at the philosophical implications of this particular one. There is an element of what's called mind-body dualism. Mind-body dualism. The quote aligns with this philosophical concept, which posits that the mind and the body are distinct entities. Right? It suggests that the mind or the soul can exist independently of the physical body. Right? So you get an idea for where somebody places their degree of preferential focus on what it is that they're interested in. There is a difference in describing something as muscle memory and describing something as memory. I'm not getting into the research of whether people think muscle memory even exists or not. It's an argument for another day. But look at the descriptive factors connected towards certain psychological implications, cognitive psychology. right? There is the focusing on this the study of thinking, the study of perception, the study of memory, the study of language. Holmes's emphasis on his brain suggests the belief in the power of these cognitive abilities to do what he does. So it's not just a throwaway dramatic line. I mean, it is, but it's not just that. It's not just a throwaway element. There are all of these other insights that it can provide. If you are just a brain, you're focused on your capacity for thought. What else does the brain do? The brain remembers, it perceives, it deduces, it induces, it abduces, it critical thinks, it speaks, it learns, right? All of these particular things are such an integral part of the way that Holmes works, right? You look at the concepts of intelligence and rationality. It's highlighting the importance of those as models, as tools in the arsenal. Right? Holmes sees himself as a rational thinker, capable of using his mental faculties in ways that nobody else can, because he is a brain. Watson is a human. Holmes is a brain in this kind of meat suit, right? There's a few comments coming. Let's have a look. Uh, uh, okay, questions about techniques. We'll save them for later. We'll save them for later. There's studies for everything, even studies of studies. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? I was looking at the discipline of noetics the other day, which is wow, that was a fun read, but again, that's a thing for another day. Um, but yeah, then the study of studies, meta-analyses, and beyond, right? About qualifying your material. Is another one that very often appears in media translations as well. Elementary, the BBC versions. Um, how often have I said to you that when you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth? If you look at the kind of scientific philosophy of it, it's it's connecting towards deductive and inductive reasoning, and even Occam's razor to a particular end. The quote embodies these principles. It's a logical process, or an application of logical processes where a general rule or a principle is applied to a specific case to draw a conclusion. And then in that case, the general rule is that if all possibilities but one have been eliminated for whatever reason, then the remaining possibility has to be true. But then you have to address that with Occam's razor, which is the principle that states that the simplest solution is very often the most likely. But then that also connects to the notion of context, right? This is something that can't be argued away from. There is a quote in medical practice that's got bandied around so often that it's definitely seeped over into public consciousness. And that is, if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, right? Because of the commonalities and the deductive reasoning involved in Occam's razor, the simplest solution based on the general availability of horses is that if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, right? First time I heard that, my immediate reaction was, well, what if you're in Africa? But there's much more zebras in Africa than there is in Stoke-on-Trent, right? If I heard hoofbeats in Stoke-on-Trent, I should definitely think horses before zebras. But if I hear hoofbeats on the plains of the Serengeti, what are the likelihoods that a Shire horse is going to go traipsing by? Right? So this is the nature of it. When you've eliminated all elements, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth within the confines of your context in that particular situation. There are psychological meanings that we can take from it, in that the quote itself suggests a way to reduce cognitive biases, confirmation bias, anchoring bias, and beyond. These are things that can lead to faulty reasoning. When I did my training with MIT, you understand that even if your application of reasoning or Occam's razor or whatever other rational model that you're using is pristine, that if your information is false, then the outcome is going to be harmed by default. The application of your ability to think through it is determined by the significance and the accuracy of the data that you're using, right? It's a problem solving strategy too, right? If you break down the problem into smaller, more manageable parts and systematically go through them, right? It's an approach that's common to detective work and scientific research. But if you start to apply this into more everyday decision making, how much easier do all things become by default when you start to apply them, right? If it is that, you know, you're you're in an argument with someone, right? What is it that you're mad at? List all the items out. Immediately, it's no longer an argument. You've diffused it because it's broken down into these systematic properties that you can then go through. You can't go through them if you can't indicate that you're not listening. It fixes all things, and I can't overstate or understate this enough. This was over 100 years ago. Over 100 years ago. Is another one. No man burdens his mind with small matters unless he has some very good reason for doing so. I love that one, just because it sounds very dramatic, uh, and I am, to use the Sherlock quote, I never could resist a touch of the dramatic. Looking at the philosophical implications again, the details connected towards um, rationalism. The quote aligns with rationalist philosophies that emphasize the power of reason and logic. It suggests that humans are primarily driven by rational thought, and that emotions or irrationality, excuse me, are less influential in decision making, which, as we know now, is true. When you look at the disconnected and connected properties that link the mind and the body, when you look at emotional qualities being antagonistic to clear reasoning, when you look at a logic-based therapy that we discussed a few sessions ago, and this concept of losing control of one's emotions, it's especially fun when somebody believes they haven't lost control, but all actions point to the contrary. I mean, I love that. But that's just that. It feels all chocolatey and warm to see that type of misunderstanding happen, right? But these elements are eons before their time, and is why, in my opinion, and only my opinion, Sherlock was such an influential element. We could make the argument that the representations here again of Occam's razor, right? That quite implies that people are generally efficient thinkers who avoid unnecessary mental burdens, choosing to focus on the more significant areas, right? This would then connect to certain psychological implications, cognitive load theory, for example. It suggests that humans have limited cognitive resources and can only process a certain amount of information at a time. That quite implying that people are selective in what they focus on and prioritizes the most important or relevant information, right? So if you're having a conversation with somebody, there is a stream of consciousness from them. Applying this type of psychological implication towards that, what it is that they speak about is going to be statistically what they believe is most important to them at the time, right? Why would sorry, I just found a mustache hair on my tongue. Why would somebody, why would I, in this scenario, start talking to you about, I don't know, basket weaving, right? Not that I have anything against basket weaving, but we're talking about the philosophy of Sherlock Holmes. That's not exactly the most important or relevant data at this particular moment in time, right? It could then also connect to attentional bias, in that humans have a tendency to focus on certain stimuli while ignoring other things, suggesting that people are more likely to pay attention to matters that they perceive as significant or relevant, right? I've made use of this particular one within my first step of a very basic method, a very basic method for reading data. It's called the outstanding principle, right? It's just inverting that to make it work for you, to start these cognitive models are buzzing, right? You know, there are certain elements of. Oh, I think I found it. Yeah, I got it. There are certain elements of neuroscience involvement, right? Neuroscience has shown that the brain is wired to prioritize information based on its perceived importance or relevance, right? So we've got backups from neuroscience, from science, from psychology, from cognitive psychology, from philosophy, all over one quote. Excuse me, right? How about this one? In the case of Silver Blaze, Holmes going to the curious incident of the dog in the night time. The dog did nothing in the night time. That was the curious incident, remarked Holmes. It's this is about observation and inference. From a scientific standpoint, that quite highlights the importance of observation and inference, right? Sherlock's observational skills allowed him to notice the absence of something, the dog barking where he expected to hear it. So this observation, combined with his logical reasoning, led him to infer that the dog's absence of action was the key to solving the case, which in a philosophical perspective is the power of negative evidence, right? Philosophically, it indicates the the absence of evidence isn't the absence of information, right? Sometimes what is not present can be just as significant as what is present. Like, you could argue that how do you know that somebody's dead? From the absence of breathing, from the absence of a pulse, right? Sherlock Holmes understood that the lack of barking from the dog was crucial, suggesting that the dog might have been silenced or prevented from barking, whatever it was. And these elements become arguably invisible in terms of the way we read information nowadays. We're so focused on what it is that's big and bright and bold and standing out, right? But what can stand out as much is the absence of something, right? If all of a sudden, right, this picture here, which is here all the time, next week is now no longer here. Now, if you've not paid attention to this background, it's not stood out to you as something important because you've not made yourself aware of this pattern. And yet, if you have, this not being here, knowing what Jeremy Brett means to me is huge. Is huge. It's the absence of information. The quote also touches on cognitive biases, in that humans often have a tendency to focus on positive evidence and overlook negative, absent information, right? Sherlock is a master at overcoming these kinds of biases, to recognize the importance of negative evidence in his investigations, right? In essence, it's showcasing his ability to think critically, observe carefully, draw logical inferences from both positive and negative data. A testament to the power of observation, deduction, and the importance of considering all aspects of a situation, even those that might seem insignificant at the first glance. Right, and we could keep going on. And you know what? I'm going to, but because we have some questions that have come in, let's address these, and then we'll wind this up, and we'll carry on with these next week. Here we go. Where were we? Da, da, da. How to memorize information from books where the information are not ordered. So what I'm inferring from this is it's information where there is no cause and effect. As in, this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, or point one, point two, point three, point four, point five, point six, and so on. Right? The link method is the easiest way to get you started. That's the easiest explanation for that. You don't need me to explain it here. It's an easily Googleable technique. But after using that to take in the literal data that isn't ordered, you've got to use it. Use it is the fastest way to get your integration going. Where are we? Are there any exercises? Well, are any exercises for deductive reasoning that can be used by yourself, especially at home? Tons, right? I mean, so much so that I would struggle to present even, a refined small list. If you're looking to practice deductive reasoning at home by yourself, it is anything that you can't immediately see the answers for. A film you haven't watched before. Pause it 20 to 30 minutes in, figure out the rest of the film. Right? Who's knocking at your door? Right? If you haven't ordered something. Boom. Right? Same thing for phone calls. Same thing for watching the news. Any information that you aren't readily aware of, you can begin to apply this. And it might seem like kind of a relaxed opportunity, but now, like, I can't see what's the other side of my TV screen here. I can't see. I have an idea because I live in observation. But then I would go, well, it's these objects and this and this and this. I don't want to tell you what's over there because it's all my things. But then I have to look in order to check, in order to confirm. Right. So these are things that we can do. Don't underestimate the fact that you are by yourself. You can apply this anywhere. If there are elements that you aren't readily aware of, you can use that as a training exercise to apply your deductive reasoning to be able to solve. My favorite Sherlock is John Lee Miller, mainly how he carries himself and more focus on the martial arts side of Sherlock. Yes, Sherlock was written as a single stick boxer. And as somebody adept at bare knuckle fighting, I didn't like the way that they did the bare knuckle approach in the Robert Downey Jr. films. It made him look too much like an action guy. But Sherlock, being as fond of action and activity and movement and engagement, it would make sense that in bringing that forward into the 21st century, that these would be the kind of approaches that he would go through. I love the kind of chess boxing moments that he went through when he was training people. Those were great. But yeah, I agree. Johnny Lee Miller is a fantastic Sherlock. And there we go, folks. That is just a brief window, and we'll get into some more of it next time in terms of the philosophy of Sherlock Holmes and why, after nearly 25 years of looking at this kind of stuff every day, I'm still learning more. I'm still learning more. And there's always more lessons that we can take from this particular material. So with that in mind, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and following along with the podcast for all of these lessons and insights and tips and thoughts and feelings on it. You're very welcome, Elvis. My pleasure. And I will talk to you all soon. All right, guys? Take care.